Have you ever noticed how heavy a thought can be? It weighs nothing on a scale, yet it can feel like you are carrying a mountain on your shoulders. It keeps you awake. It keeps you tight. It keeps you from the peace you deserve. I'm glad you're here. If you are listening to this, it's likely that your day has been long, or your mind is busy. Perhaps you are replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, or simply feeling a tension you can't quite name. That is okay. You don't need to force it to stop. And if you feel like it, you can gently let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Sometimes, it's comforting to realize how many of us are quietly sharing this same moment from different corners of the world. You see, the mind is like a guardian dog. It barks at shadows because it wants to protect you. We don't need to yell at the dog to be quiet. We just need to gently let it know that we are safe, so it can lay its head down and rest. For the next hour, I am going to share a collection of stories with you. These aren't just fairy tales. They are mirrors. Some are from the Zen tradition, some from Stoic philosophy, and some are simple metaphors for the human experience. Each story revolves around two things: the art of letting go and the discovery of your inner strength. You don't need to memorize these stories. You don't even need to listen to every word. If you drift off to sleep in the middle of a sentence, that is perfect. That is the goal. Think of my voice as a gentle breeze. You can enjoy it while it's there, but you don't need to hold on to it. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillows. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Let's begin with our first journey, a journey about the weight we choose to carry. Some smells aren't overpowering, but if you carry them long enough, they wear you down. Not because they bother anyone else, but because you're the one closest to them. Resentment is like that. It doesn't always flare up as anger. Sometimes it's just a low, lingering odor that clings to everyday moments. Rachel got home after the sky had fully darkened. She set her bag on a chair, slipped off her shoes by the door, and went straight into the kitchen. A long workday, picking up her child, a few unexpected phone calls. She didn't think she was angry at anyone. She just felt tired. A kind of tiredness without a clear source. She opened the fridge, looked inside for a few seconds, then closed it. There was nothing she needed. Not because there wasn't food, but because her mind hadn't decided yet. Rachel turned on the faucet at the sink, letting the water run while she gathered trash from the counter. The sound of the water covered the leftover noise of the day. She pulled the trash bag out of the bin. It was heavier than she expected. As she lifted it, a faint smell drifted up. Not sharp, not obvious, but enough to make her pause. Rachel frowned and bent down to open the bag. Inside were a few old potatoes forgotten in the corner of the cabinet from the week before. No longer usable. She tied the bag shut, a familiar motion, then set it on the floor, getting ready to take it outside. But before leaving, Rachel stood still for a few seconds. Not because of the smell, but because of another feeling, one she recognized right away, rising quietly in her chest. She thought about a conversation from earlier that afternoon, a careless comment, A remark that seemed small. Rachel had nodded, smiled lightly, said, "It's fine." But her body hadn't forgotten. It held on to the feeling the way the trash bag held the smell of what had gone bad. Rachel didn't think of herself as someone who holds grudges. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't retell the story. But some emotions, when they aren't spoken, find their own way to stay. They settle into a corner somewhere, waiting until they're heavy enough to start bothering you. She took the trash outside and dropped it into the large bin in front of the house. When the lid closed, the smell vanished instantly. Rachel stood there for a moment and took a deep breath. The night air was cool and clean. A small sense of relief arrived faster than she expected. Back in the kitchen, Rachel washed her hands. Warm water ran between her fingers. She noticed she'd been gripping the trash bag tighter than necessary. Her hand felt slightly sore. So did her shoulders. She let her shoulders drop and allowed the water to carry away whatever was still clinging. A very simple thought appeared. If she kept that bag of rotten potatoes in the kitchen for a few more days, no one would be affected more than her. The smell wouldn't drift into the neighbors' houses. It would stay right here closest to her. And resentment works the same way. Rachel leaned back against the sink as the water slowed. She didn't try to analyze her feelings. She didn't need to name them. She just noticed that some things had reached the point where they needed to be taken out. Not to prove she was right, just so she wouldn't have to live with the smell anymore. She turned off the faucet. The kitchen grew quieter. Soft yellow light reflected off the clean counter. Nothing big had changed. But the air felt different. A little lighter, a little easier to breathe. Rachel knew she wouldn't always remember to check the corners of her inner cabinets. Sometimes she would forget, and the smell would return. But tonight, simply noticing that she had been carrying something spoiled already felt like a beginning. She dried her hands, hung the towel back on its hook, and stood still for a moment in the familiar kitchen. There was nothing she needed to do right away, nothing she needed to react to. Just a body that had finally set down a heavy bag it had been carrying for a little too long. After finishing the kitchen, Rachel didn't turn on the TV. She switched off most of the lights, leaving only the soft glow of a small lamp near the sink. The space felt wider with less light filling it. She noticed she didn't need any more stimulation. The day had already been long enough. Rachel walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa. It sank slightly beneath her, supporting her back in a familiar way. She took off her watch and placed it on the table. A small action, but her body felt as if something tight around her wrist had finally been loosened after a long day. The air in the house felt different. No lingering smell. No need to avoid anything. She breathed in then out more slowly than usual, not because she was trying to relax, but because nothing was pushing her anymore. She thought briefly about the conversation from the afternoon. Not to analyze it, just to see it as a moment that had already passed. At the time, she hadn't said anything, not because she was weak, but because she didn't have the space to speak yet. And that was okay. Not everything needs to be resolved right away to be considered fine. Rachel stood up and went into the bathroom, splashing cool water on her face. It woke her up a little, but in a gentle way. When When she lifted her head, she looked at herself in the mirror. Not closely, not to search for flaws, just seeing someone who was tired and allowed to rest. She dried her face, turned off the bathroom light, and walked slowly toward the bedroom. Each step felt lighter than when she had first come home. Not because every emotion had been worked through, but because she was no longer carrying the rotten potato bag inside her. It had been set outside where it belonged. When she lay down, Rachel didn't think about whether she should forgive or not. Those questions could wait. Tonight, she only needed to stop making herself uncomfortable. The blanket rested over her shoulders, the temperature just right. She pulled it up a little higher, then stopped. Some kinds of relief don't come from understanding something big. They come from very simple actions, like taking something spoiled out of your living space. No announcements, no arguments, just setting it down. Rachel turned onto her side, finding her familiar position. Her breath moved in and out, steady and calm. There was nothing she needed to remember, nothing she needed to hold on to. Any leftover thoughts, if they appeared at all, drifted past as lightly as a smell fading from the air. If she remembered the situation again tomorrow, that would be okay. It might return the way you sometimes forget to check the kitchen cabinet on another day. But tonight, she had already cleaned up, and her body knew it. The room was quiet. No sudden sounds, no conclusions, just a clean, open space enough to rest. And in that space, sleep arrived without hurry, the way it does when the house is finally clean and there's no lingering smell left to pull you back. Some evenings don't feel heavy because of what happened during the day. They feel heavy because of how you spoke to yourself while it was happening. Not out loud, just quietly in ways no one else could hear. Jasmine had gotten used to that voice. She was 34, worked as a real estate agent, and spent most of her days smiling, reassuring, adjusting her tone depending on who stood in front of her. Confidence was part of the job. Calm, too. People wanted to feel safe when they talked about homes, money, futures. Jasmine knew how to give them that feeling. What she rarely gave herself was the same kindness. That night she came home later than planned. Not late enough to be a problem, just late enough to feel the day lingering in her body. She slipped off her shoes, dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, and went straight to the bathroom without turning on the overhead lights. The small lamp above the mirror was enough. She turned on the faucet and washed her hands slowly, watching the water move over her skin. Clear, steady, predictable. The fan hummed softly above her, filling the room with a low, even sound. Jasmine looked up at the mirror without really meaning to. Her reflection stared back, familiar and slightly tired. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing remarkable either. Just a face at the end of a long day. And then the voice showed up. You should have handled that call better. You sounded unsure. You probably came off as unprepared. The thoughts arrived the way they always did, quick, automatic, dressed up as helpful feedback. Jasmine didn't flinch. She had heard them so many times they felt like part of the background. She reached for a towel and dried her hands, her eyes still on the mirror. For a moment she noticed something small. The The tighter her thoughts became, the harder her face looked. Jaw set, brow slightly furrowed, shoulders rising without permission. She exhaled without planning to. The face in the mirror softened just a little. Jasmine leaned closer and rested her hands on the edge of the sink. The glass reflected her exactly as she was. Not worse, not better, just accurate. She thought about how often she treated herself like a project that needed constant improvement. How every interaction became something to review, every silence something to interpret. The world in her mind felt sharp because her inner lens was sharp. The mirror didn't argue. It didn't reassure her either. It simply showed what was placed in front of it. Water continued to run in the sink. Jasmine turned it off and listened to the last drops fade away. The quiet felt wider now, like the room had exhaled with her. She remembered something she once heard, though she couldn't recall where. A lake reflects whatever stands before it. It doesn't decide what's worthy of being seen. That idea stayed with her as she studied her own reflection. Maybe the world hadn't been harsh today. Maybe it had simply been reflecting the way she was looking at herself. That thought didn't accuse her. It didn't blame her. It just hovered, offering space. Jasmine straightened and gently wiped a small smudge from the mirror with her sleeve. The glass cleared only slightly, but enough to notice the difference. The reflection didn't change much, but the effort felt kind. She turned off the bathroom light and walked into the bedroom, leaving the mirror behind. The apartment was quiet. Streetlights cast soft lines across the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed and let her shoulders drop forward, then back. For the first time that evening, she didn't replay the day. She didn't rewrite conversations. She didn't correct herself. She simply sat. If the world felt harsh sometimes, Jasmine realized it might not be because it was judging her. It might be because she was standing in front of it with clenched hands and a tight heart. And just like the mirror, the world could only reflect what it was given. She lay down slowly, the mattress meeting her weight without resistance. Her breathing deepened on its own. Somewhere inside, the voice grew quieter, not because it was silenced, but because it wasn't being fed. The lake doesn't need to change the sky. It only needs stillness to reflect it clearly. Jasmine closed her eyes, letting that thought settle without turning it into a rule or a promise. Just a gentle understanding allowed to be unfinished. Jasmine lay still for a while, long enough for the room to lose its edges. The streetlights outside didn't move, but their glow softened as her eyes adjusted. Somewhere below, a car passed and then faded, leaving the night intact again. Nothing called for her attention. Nothing needed a response. Her body began to settle in small, quiet ways. Her jaw loosened first, then her shoulders. The tight place between her ribs softened, as if it had finally been given permission to stop holding itself together. She thought again about the mirror, about how easily she had believed the reflection was the problem. For so long she had assumed that if the image felt harsh, then something about her must be harsh too. But mirrors don't judge. They don't criticize. They don't exaggerate. They only show what's placed in front of them exactly as it is. The same was true, she realized, for so many moments in her life. Conversations that felt cold, silences that felt heavy, rejections that felt personal. What if they weren't proof of something wrong with her, but reflections of how tightly she was holding herself while standing there? The thought didn't land as a revelation. It felt more like a quiet reframing, the kind that doesn't ask you to change immediately, just to notice. Jasmine turned onto her side and pulled the blanket up a little higher. The fabric brushed against her cheek, grounding familiar. Her breathing slowed further, deep and uncounted. Thoughts still came, but they moved like ripples now instead of waves. A showing that didn't turn into an argument. A message she hadn't answered yet. A feeling of mild regret that didn't demand punishment. She noticed how different it felt to meet those thoughts without sharpening them, without turning them into evidence, without adding a second layer of judgment on top. In the bathroom earlier, when she had softened her face, the reflection had softened too. Not because the mirror changed, but because she did. That small act of gentleness had altered the entire scene. Maybe self-worth wasn't something you built or earned. Maybe it was something that appeared naturally when you stopped attacking your own reflection. Jasmine didn't promise herself she would be kinder from now on. She knew better than to make vows at night, but she allowed the possibility that tomorrow didn't need to begin with criticism. That the day could be met with open hands instead of clenched ones. Her breath moved slowly in and out, steady as water settling after being stirred. The image of a lake came to her mind, calm and wide. When the surface is agitated, everything looks distorted. When it rests, the sky shows itself without effort. She didn't need to fix the lake. She only needed to stop throwing stones into it. The thought drifted through her and dissolved before it could turn into advice. Jasmine stayed with the feeling instead. The quiet relief of not having to manage herself for a moment. The safety of not being evaluated. Outside, the city continued to exist without her supervision. Lights stayed on, lights turned off, people slept, people woke. The world didn't require her commentary to keep moving. Jasmine felt herself getting heavier in the good way. The kind of heaviness that comes before sleep when the body trusts the surface beneath it. Her eyelids grew warm. The space behind her eyes darkened. If the world reflected how she treated herself, then this moment mattered. Not as a lesson, not as a breakthrough, but as practice. A brief experience of being met with softness instead of scrutiny. She let her thoughts blur at the edges, let the day slide out of focus. There would be time later to look again if needed. Tonight wasn't for that. The lake doesn't hold on to images. It reflects and then it rests. Jasmine rested too. Some fears don't scream. They stand still, hidden behind a door that's only slightly closed. And because they stay there so long, they begin to grow inside the imagination. Chloe got back to her room late that night. Her shift at the store had run longer than expected. Her feet ached. Her mind felt empty in a familiar way. The bedroom was small. A soft yellow desk lamp gave just enough light to move around without tripping, but not enough to make everything feel fully clear. She set her bag down on the chair, slipped off her shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. Not because anything was wrong, just because her body wasn't ready to stand again yet. In the quiet room, there was a very soft sound, the steady hum of the air conditioner repeating like a background rhythm. Chloe was 22, working in retail, used to smiling, responding, reacting quickly. But when she was alone, that reflex wasn't needed. And when nothing needed her reaction anymore, the things she'd pushed aside all day began to show themselves. Her eyes drifted to the closet. The wooden door was closed. Nothing unusual about it. And yet, there was a faint, almost shapeless feeling that something inside hadn't been touched. Not in a horror movie way. Just a pocket of darkness holding thoughts she wasn't quite ready to face. Chloe stood up and walked toward the closet. Her hand rested on the handle, then stopped. Not because of clear fear, just a familiar hesitation. Like knowing there's an unread message, but not opening it yet, not because of what it says, but because of what it might stir up. Some fears grow precisely because we avoid them. Each time we don't open the door, the mind adds another detail, another possibility, another imagined outcome. And before long, the door stops being just a door. It becomes a symbol for everything we haven't dared to look at. Chloe let go of the handle and turned back to the bed. She sat down, pulled the blanket up slightly, then let it fall back again. She wasn't trying to sleep yet. Being close to the bed just made her feel safer. In her mind, familiar thoughts began to run quietly. What if I'm not good enough? What if I choose the wrong path? What if everyone else moves forward and I stay stuck? They didn't make noise, but they were clear enough to tighten her chest just a little. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, then opened them. The desk lamp looked the same. Nothing had changed. And in that moment, Chloe realized what was exhausting her wasn't the lack of answers, it was leaving the questions in the dark. She stood up again. This time she moved more slowly. Her hand returned to the closet handle. Cool, ordinary. No sign of danger, just wood, metal, and her own room. Chloe pulled the closet door open just a crack. Not all the way. Just enough for a line of light to slip inside. Hanging clothes came into view, a few jackets, plastic hangers tapping softly against each other. No ghost, just familiar things quietly waiting to be seen. She opened it a little more. The light spread. The inside of the closet became clearer, and at the same time, a strange feeling appeared, lightness. Not because anything had been solved, but because there was no longer a need to imagine. Some fears don't need to be defeated. They only need to be seen. When light touches them, they shrink not from shame, but because their job is finished. Chloe let out a breath, longer than usual. Her shoulders dropped. She realized she'd been holding tension for a long time without noticing. Not because of the closet, but because of the thoughts that had been standing there unopened for too long. She opened the closet door all the way. Looked inside without rushing. Just looked. No analysis, no labels. There were clothes she hadn't worn in a long time, items that belonged to earlier chapters of her life. Nothing frightening, just time having passed. Chloe closed the closet door again. This time the motion was softer. not closing it to avoid something, but closing it after having looked. She went back to the bed and lay down. The air conditioner continued its steady hum. The ceiling was still. But inside her, a small space had opened. Not an empty space of lack, but a space created by no longer having to brace herself against avoidance. Maybe fear isn't most frightening when it's in front of us. Maybe it's most frightening when we leave it behind a door and let imagination do the rest. After closing the closet door, Chloe didn't turn on any more lights. She let the room stay exactly as it was, bright enough to see dim, enough not to demand attention. There was a subtle shift in the air, hard to name, as if the room had just exhaled after holding its breath for too long. She lay on her side and pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, not curling in on herself like she often did, not shrinking, just lying there, letting her back sink into the mattress, letting her weight be held by something other than herself. The air conditioner continued its steady hum, a familiar background sound that didn't need listening to. The thoughts were still there, but they weren't pressed right up against the edge of her awareness anymore. They had stepped back a little, like when you turn on a light in a dark room. The objects don't disappear. They just stop crowding each other. Chloe thought about the moment her hand had rested on the closet handle. That brief hesitation. Not exactly fear, but uncertainty about whether she was ready to look. And then after she had looked, she realized the hardest part hadn't been what was inside, but carrying it around without knowing its shape. Some fears survive on vagueness. They don't need to be big. They only need to stay unseen. And once light is present, they don't have much work left to do. Chloe rolled onto her back. The ceiling was faint in the lamplight. She let her eyes rest on an indistinct spot, not trying to focus. Her breathing was even. Not deep, not shallow, just even. A quiet understanding settled in. She didn't need to solve every question the moment she saw it. Seeing was enough for tonight. No answers required. No plans needed. Just knowing they weren't ghosts. In the stillness of the room, nothing was asking anything of her. No one waiting for a response. Nothing to prove. Chloe wasn't a better version of herself than she had been earlier. She was just a version that was avoiding a little less. And that didn't feel exhausting. A soft click came from the air conditioner as it shifted cycles. Chloe closed her eyes, not to fall asleep yet, just to stop looking. A gentle warmth spread from her chest, not happiness, not sadness, just the feeling of being allowed to be still. If the questions returned tomorrow, they would return. There was no promise they would disappear. But now Chloe knew she could open the door when she needed to. And knowing that was enough to make the darkness less frightening for now. She placed one hand on her belly and felt the rise and fall of her breath. No need to control it. No need to track it. Just noticing. Some nights don't require great courage. They only ask for one small act to look and then allow yourself to rest afterward. Not resting because you've defeated fear, but resting because you're no longer running. The room slowly settled into a deeper quiet. The background hum steady. The light unchanged. Chloe didn't need to change anything else. The night held the rest for her. There are some things in life that move farther away the more you try to grab them. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because their nature doesn't respond well to being chased. Peace is one of those things. The more you try to force yourself to feel calm, the louder your mind becomes. Olivia is 27 years old. She works as a barista at a small cafe. Her shifts start early and end earlier than most. That afternoon after work, she goes home, changes clothes, and sits out on the back porch. A string of lights hangs across the yard, glowing a soft yellow. The space is quiet, with only the sound of leaves brushing against each other as a light breeze passes through. Olivia brings a cup of tea with her. Not hot, not cold, just warm enough to hold comfortably. She sits down on the wooden chair, sets the cup on the small table in front of her, and lets out a long breath. Not because she's completely worn out, but because all day she's been holding things together. Orders crowds the coffee grinder, one request flowing into the next without pause. Now that everything is quiet, her mind refuses to be. Small thoughts begin to show up. Maybe I should ask to switch shifts. Am I even going in the right direction? Why does everyone else seem more settled? Each thought is small, but they keep coming one after another, like butterflies fluttering wildly inside her head. Olivia takes a sip of tea. It tastes faint. She sets the cup down, then absent-mindedly picks up her phone. The screen lights up. No new messages. She scrolls through a few apps without looking for anything specific, just searching for a sense of calm. But the more she scrolls, the more tangled her thoughts become. She turns the screen off and places the phone face down on the table. A butterfly drifts across the porch. Small, pale. It circles once or twice, then disappears into the darkness. Olivia watches it without much thought. But the image stays with her longer than the thoughts from a moment ago. When she was a child, she loved chasing butterflies. She would run after them, arms waving through the air, always believing that if she were just a little faster, she'd catch one. But the more she ran, the higher they flew. Eventually, she'd get tired and drop onto the grass, breathing hard. And then when she stopped chasing sometimes, a butterfly would land nearby, quietly, naturally. Olivia leans back in her chair. She realizes she's been doing the same thing with peace, chasing it by thinking more, analyzing more, comparing more. And each time she does, her mind only gets louder. Not because she's wrong, just because that approach doesn't work. She rests her hands on her thighs, holding nothing. The breeze moves again, making the string lights sway slightly. The light shifts with the wind, not still, but not rushed either. Olivia watches the glow for a while, not trying to focus, just watching. For a few minutes, she doesn't try to empty her mind. She simply doesn't chase any thoughts. When a thought appears, she notices it and lets it pass like the butterfly from earlier. No reaching out, no running after it. Some things only appear when we stop searching for them. Not because we give up, but because we stop doing the things that make them pull away. Peace is like that too. It doesn't like being pushed. It comes when it feels safe. Olivia closes her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to feel the cool air on her face. A car passes somewhere in the distance. Dry leaves crunch under someone's steps nearby. The sounds are there, but none of them ask anything of her. She opens her eyes again. The butterfly doesn't return, but something inside her has shifted. Not complete calm, just less tension, like when you stop running and your heartbeat slowly finds its way back to normal. If you're listening to this and recognize how you've been chasing a feeling of calm, that's okay. Many people do, and many people grow tired from it. Maybe tonight you don't need to look for peace at all. Maybe you only need to sit still for a moment and let it come to you on its own. Olivia stays on the back porch a little longer. Not because she's waiting for anything to happen, but because there's no longer a reason to rush back inside. The tea has gone completely cold. She doesn't pick it up again. She just lets it sit there like a quiet sign that it's okay for things to pause for a while. The air feels cooler now. The string lights sway ever so slightly, their glow shifting slowly, unevenly, but not in a way that demands attention. Olivia lets her eyes rest on the dark yard in front of her. She isn't looking for anything in particular, just seeing what's already there. A small thought appears. I'm sitting here doing nothing. Right after it, another follows. Is this a waste of time? Olivia smiles very faintly, almost imperceptibly. She doesn't answer either thought. There's no need. They arrive and then they move on like two butterflies passing through the air. She adjusts her position, leaning more fully into the chair. The back of it is cool and solid. Her body is supported now, no need to hold herself upright. When she doesn't have to hold, her shoulders drop on their own. Her breathing slows, not by counting, just by following the ease of each exhale. Some evenings, what exhausts us isn't the work itself, but the constant reminder that we're supposed to be doing something. Supposed to relax. Supposed to be calm. Supposed to figure things out. But peace doesn't arrive on command. It shows up when no one is standing in front of it, hands outstretched, demanding it appear. Olivia looks down at her hands. They're open, not clenched. Her fingers curve naturally. And she notices something simple. When your hands are open, there's nothing to drop. There's just space to hold something if needed. And when nothing is needed, that space still feels okay. Another butterfly drifts into the circle of light. This one doesn't loop around much. It glides through slowly, then lands on the edge of the table for a few seconds. Olivia doesn't move. She doesn't hold her breath. She doesn't think she has to memorize the moment. She just watches. And then the butterfly lifts off again. The moment is brief, but it's enough for her to see something she'd only heard before. Some things only appear when we stop trying to pull them closer. Not because we don't care, but because we stop frightening them. Olivia closes her eyes. This time her eyelids feel a little heavier. She doesn't resist it. She also doesn't force herself to stay awake. She lets her body decide. If it wants to stay alert, that's fine. If it wants to rest, that's fine too. In that quiet space, thoughts still appear now and then. But they don't crowd in. They arrive one at a time, then fade. No story gets told from beginning to end. No loop grows strong enough to carry her away. If you're listening to this and your mind still feels a bit busy, that's okay. You don't need to push it away. Just don't run after it. Like butterflies, you don't have to sit perfectly still in a tense way. You only need to pause and let things unfold. Maybe tonight you don't need to look for peace. Maybe it's already very close. It just doesn't like being chased. When it's fully dark, Olivia stands up. She turns off the string lights and slides the porch door closed. There's no sense of loss. Just the feeling that this moment was enough. She moves back inside slowly, as if she doesn't want to disturb the calm that settled in. When she lies down, she doesn't think about tomorrow. She doesn't think about choices that need to be made. She lets her head rest on the pillow, lets the blanket cover her. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this story, that's perfectly natural. If you haven't yet, you're still resting. There's no need to chase sleep. Just let it come to you. Listen a little longer, or fall asleep whenever you'd like. Some things are handed to us without being asked for. Not gifts, but words, a tone, a comment wrapped in irritation. And we often assume that because it was sent, it automatically belongs to us. But maybe like any other gift, if we don't accept it, it stays with the person who offered it. Jasmine was 34, a real estate agent used to her phone buzzing all day long. Quick texts, rushed calls, promises made while everyone was tense. That evening, she pulled up in front of her house, turned off the engine, but didn't get out right away. The streetlight reflected off the windshield, casting a dim glow just enough to see the dashboard clearly. Her phone vibrated. A voicemail. The caller's name appeared. Jasmine knew that voice. She had heard it many times on good days and on difficult ones. She didn't open it immediately. She just stared at the screen for a few seconds, as if considering a door. Finally, she pressed play. The voice came through not loud, but sharp, not openly insulting. Just sentences laced with disappointment, blame, and a subtle edge of contempt carefully packaged. When the voicemail ended, the screen went quiet again. But inside Jasmine, it didn't. She placed the phone face down on the seat beside her. Her hand trembled slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her to feel it. A familiar heat rose in her chest, not exploding, just spreading slowly, like holding something that isn't very hot, but burns if you hold it long enough. Jasmine thought about calling back, thought about the sharp responses she could deliver, thought about explaining herself, then thought about staying silent. Each thought opened a different path, but they all started in the same place. She was holding something that had just been handed to her. She breathed in, then out. Not deep, not long. Just enough to notice she had been holding her breath. She looked at the phone face down, lying still like an ordinary object. Nothing in it was demanding an immediate response. There was no countdown clock. No rule forcing her to open her hands and receive it. Jasmine remembered an old question she'd heard somewhere before. If someone gives you a gift, but you don't accept it, who does the gift belong to? She didn't think about it as a moral lesson. It simply appeared clear and real, right there on the passenger seat beside her. The words in that voicemail, however unpleasant, were only sounds that had already passed. They couldn't enter her body unless she opened the door. But her habit, like many people's, was to open that door quickly, to take it in, and carry it along. Jasmine rested her hand on the steering wheel. Her fingers touched the cool surface. She noticed the contrast between that coolness and the heat spreading in her chest. Both existed at the same time. And for the first time that evening, she realized she had a very small choice to set the phone aside or to keep holding it. She chose to set it down, not to throw it away, not to block the number, just to turn it face down so the screen couldn't look at her anymore. A small movement, but it created a necessary distance, like placing an object that doesn't belong to you back on the table. Jasmine opened the car door and stepped outside. The night air was cooler than the air inside the car. She took a longer breath than before. The heat didn't disappear immediately, but it stopped being fed. No replies formed in her mind. No new story took shape. She locked the car, heard the familiar click, and walked toward the front door. The phone stayed in her pocket silent. The gift was still there, but it hadn't been accepted. And that alone was enough to send the evening in a different direction. Jasmine stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The sound was soft, just enough to signal that the long day was now outside. She didn't turn on all the lights. She left only the gentle glow from the living room, just enough to see where she was going. The quiet welcomed her without asking for anything more. She set her keys on the table, hung up her jacket, and stood still for a few seconds. Not out of hesitation, just letting her body recalibrate like after leaving a noisy place. In that quiet pause, Jasmine noticed that her phone was still silent in her pocket. No vibration, no light, nothing reminding her that something needed a response. She took the phone out and placed it on the table beside the sofa face down. Not a dramatic gesture, just setting it there like placing an unopened package off to the side. She sat down, leaning back into the soft cushions. Her shoulders dropped slightly, almost without her noticing. The words from the voicemail were still echoing faintly in her mind, but they no longer felt as sharp as they had earlier, when they weren't being picked up and turned over again and again. They began to fade like a distant sound lowering its own volume. Jasmine wasn't trying to forget. She just wasn't replaying it anymore. She went into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Cool, clear. She drank in small sips, feeling her throat soften. Sometimes taking care of the body in the simplest way is the quickest way for the mind to stop arguing. Back on the sofa, Jasmine sat for a while. She didn't turn on the news. She didn't open social media. Those places often carry even more unrequested gifts. Tonight, she didn't need to accept anything else. She thought about how many words over the years she had taken in that didn't really belong to her. Taken out of politeness, taken out of habit, taken out of fear that silence would make things worse. But silence sometimes is just closing the window when the wind gets too strong. Jasmine stood up and went into the bathroom, splashing cool water on her face. It washed away the fatigue of the day. When she lifted her head, she looked at herself in the mirror. Not inspecting, not judging, just seeing someone who was learning not to open her hands so quickly anymore. She dried her face, turned off the light, and walked slowly toward the bedroom. Each step steady, unhurried. The phone stayed in the living room. She didn't bring it with her. She didn't need to. Tonight there was no conversation that needed to keep going in her head. When she lay down, Jasmine pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. The temperature was just right. The air in the room was cool and still. She turned onto her side, finding her familiar position. Her body responded almost immediately, as if it had been waiting for this moment. If those words return at another time, that's okay. They can exist somewhere, but they don't need to be held. Not everything that's offered needs to be accepted to prove anything. Jasmine closed her eyes. She didn't force herself to sleep. She let her eyelids grow heavy with the rhythm of her breath. Inhale, exhale, slow and even. No reaction waiting, no answer being prepared. Some nights peace comes from realizing you're allowed to refuse gently, without explaining, without pushing back, simply by not opening your hands. The room settled into silence. Everything was in its place. And in that stillness, sleep arrived without words, like setting a gift back where it truly belongs. Jason turned off the engine and stayed in the car. The parking lot was almost empty. A few lights buzzed overhead, throwing pale circles onto the asphalt. Somewhere nearby, a tree moved in the wind, its leaves brushing against each other in a slow, uneven rhythm. He should have gone inside. His apartment was only a short walk away. But he stayed where he was, hands resting on the steering wheel, shoulders slightly hunched forward as if he were still bracing for something. Jason was 23, a community college student still figuring out what he was supposed to become. Lately, it felt like everyone else had already decided. Friends posting graduation photos, new jobs, new cities, new lives that looked clean and confident from the outside. He hadn't failed. Not exactly. But he hadn't arrived anywhere either. Jason glanced at his phone on the passenger seat face down. He already knew what was there. Notifications he didn't want to open. Photos he didn't want to compare himself to. Timelines that made his own life feel stalled. He looked away and focused instead on the tree near the edge of the lot. It was old, thick trunk, wide branches reaching out in every direction. The kind of tree that didn't look like it had ever been in a hurry. Its roots must have been deep by now, spreading out beneath the concrete in ways no one could see. Jason watched it sway slightly in the breeze and felt something tighten in his chest. Earlier that day, he'd been in a small garden section of a hardware store, killing time before class. He hadn't meant to stop there. He just wandered in, drawn by the quiet. On a low shelf near the back, he'd noticed a row of bonsai trees, each one carefully shaped, trimmed, wired into a precise form. They were beautiful, controlled, finished. He remembered thinking how neat they looked, how intentional, How impressive it must be to grow something so perfectly contained. Now sitting in his car, he thought about the difference between those bonsai trees and the old one in front of him. Both alive, both real, but grown under very different conditions. Jason rested his forehead lightly against the steering wheel. The car was still warm from the drive. The faint smell of plastic and dust filled the space. He'd spent the last year feeling like a bonsai in the wrong pot, trimmed too often, compared too closely, constantly adjusted to fit a shape he wasn't even sure he wanted. Every time he thought about taking a different path, a quieter voice in his head would pull him back. "You're falling behind. You should be further along by now." That voice sounded practical, reasonable. It rarely yelled. It just kept pointing out how much taller other people seemed. Jason straightened up and rolled his shoulders, trying to release some of the tension that had been building there all evening. His breath came shallow at first, then slowly deepened as he sat there longer. The old tree outside didn't care how tall it looked compared to anything else. It wasn't measured against a timeline. It didn't apologize for growing slowly or unevenly. It simply took up the space it had been given year after year. Jason realized how often he'd assumed there was a single right shape for a life. Graduate by this age, earn this much, know this clearly who you are. Anything outside that shape felt like a mistake. But what if some lives weren't meant to be trimmed small and tidy? What if some needed time, space, messy seasons where nothing looked impressive from the outside? He opened the car door and stepped out. The air felt cooler, immediately brushing against his face and arms. He walked a few steps toward the tree, stopping at the edge of the parking lot. Up close, the bark was rough, uneven. Scars from years of weather insects, repairs the tree had done on its own. Jason reached out and rested his palm against the trunk. It felt solid, grounded, alive. The tree hadn't grown like this by accident. It had grown like this because it had been allowed to. Jason closed his eyes for a moment and let himself breathe. Not deeply on purpose, just enough to feel the air move in and out of his chest without resistance. Maybe he wasn't late. Maybe he wasn't behind. Maybe he was just not meant to grow in a shallow container. The thought didn't solve anything. It didn't give him a plan. But it loosened something inside him, the way loosening a tight knot doesn't fix the rope but makes it usable again. Jason stepped back, gave the tree one last look, and headed toward his apartment. The night felt quieter now, less judgmental. Not because his life had changed, but because the way he was measuring it had softened. Some things aren't small because they're weak. Some things are small because someone keeps cutting them back, and some things, given enough room, grow exactly as they're meant to. Jason didn't turn on the lights when he entered the apartment. The faint glow from the parking lot slipped in through the window, enough to see the outlines of furniture, enough to move without effort. He set his keys down on the counter and left his shoes by the door, not lining them up the way he usually did. Tonight didn't feel like a night for adjustments. He sat on the edge of the couch and let his back curve forward naturally, elbows resting on his thighs. His phone stayed in his pocket. For once, he didn't feel pulled toward it. The comparisons it held felt distant now, like something that belonged to another room. The image of the old tree stayed with him, not as a lesson, not as an idea to apply, but as a feeling in his body. The weight of the trunk, the steadiness, the sense of time moving slowly, without apology. Jason noticed how often his life had felt like it was being shaped from the outside. Grades, expectations, advice offered with good intentions, all of it trimming, wiring, redirecting. None of it meant to harm him, and yet something in him had been quietly resisting for a long time. He leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. A small crack ran across it, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. He had lived here for months before ever seeing it. Now it seemed almost comforting proof that things didn't need to be flawless to hold. The old tree outside hadn't asked to be admired. It hadn't worried about being impressive. It had grown because it was alive, because the ground beneath it was deep enough, because no one had tried to make it smaller to fit a shelf. Jason felt his breathing slow as that thought settled. Not intentionally, not as a technique, just a natural response to not being measured for a moment. He thought about the bonsai trees again, how much care they required, how carefully they were pruned, shaped, constrained. They weren't wrong. They were beautiful in their own way. But they needed constant attention to remain that way. Maybe some lives thrived on structure and careful shaping, and maybe others needed seasons of uneven growth stretches where nothing looked tidy or finished. Maybe comparing one to the other had never made sense in the first place. Jason shifted his weight and felt the couch cushion rise and fall beneath him. The room was quiet enough that he could hear his own breath, steady and unforced. The tension he'd been carrying in his chest earlier had softened like a muscle finally allowed to rest. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel resolved. What he felt was simpler than that. He felt allowed. Allowed to grow slowly. Allowed to change direction. Allowed not to know yet. The pressure to arrive somewhere specific eased its grip. Not gone, just quieter, less convincing. It no longer sounded like truth. More like a habit losing momentum. Jason stood up and walked to the window, looking out toward the parking lot. The tree was still there, barely visible now, its shape blending into the dark. He didn't need to see it clearly to know it was standing. Some growth happens where no one is watching. Some strength comes from being left alone. He turned away from the window and moved toward the bedroom. The floor was cool under his feet. The bed welcomed him without resistance, sheets folding easily around his weight. He lay on his side and let his arms rest where they fell. There was nothing he needed to plan tonight, nothing he needed to compare. Tomorrow could handle itself. As his eyes grew heavy, Jason noticed one last thing. The feeling of being behind had been replaced by something quieter. A sense of being exactly where he was without judgment attached. Not small, not late, just growing in his own way. The old tree didn't rush the night, and neither did he. The room settled. The thoughts thinned. The measuring stopped. And in the dark, with no one watching, something inside him continued to grow slowly, naturally, without needing to prove itself at all. Some fears don't come from things standing still, but from the feeling that everything is moving too fast. Like water rising quietly. No noise, no warning, until you suddenly realize you've been trying to swim against the current. Marcus left work after it was fully dark. He drove his familiar delivery truck into the automatic car wash near his place, where bright white lights reflected off wet metal. That night, he wasn't in a hurry. Not because he had extra time, but because his body felt tired in a way that was hard to name, tired from gripping the steering wheel for too long. Marcus was 41, a delivery driver, used to packed schedules, used to being on time, en route, on rhythm. But tonight, as the truck rolled to the start of the wash track, he let his hands drop from the wheel and allowed the vehicle to move forward on its own. A very small thing, very ordinary, and somehow unfamiliar. The doors closed. Water began to pour over the windshield, loud at first, then settling into a steady rush. The sound of the water covered everything else, blurring the outside world. Marcus sat still, watching droplets race across the glass, merging and separating, never moving in straight lines. Inside the cab, everything felt quieter. No radio, no alerts. Just the sound of water and the gentle vibration as the conveyor pulled the truck along. Marcus noticed he was holding his breath, an old habit whenever he waited for something uncertain. He breathed out, letting his chest fall, then breathed in again slower. A memory surfaced of swimming in a river when he was a kid. The adults had warned him, if the current is strong, don't fight it. Let your body float. Let the water carry you toward a safer edge. Back then, Marcus didn't understand. Swimming against it felt like trying. Letting go sounded like giving up. But later, he learned that in fast-moving water, struggling in the wrong direction is what puts you in danger. The water kept pouring down. Soft brushes spun and brushed against the sides of the truck, then moved on. Marcus noticed his hands resting on his thighs. His fingers were slightly curled, as if ready to grip again at any moment. He opened his hand just a little, not letting go completely, just easing the tension. Marcus's fear didn't have a clear shape. It wasn't one specific event. It was the sense that if he stopped controlling things for even a second, everything would slip off course. That if he didn't stay tight, didn't keep holding it together, life would carry him somewhere he hadn't planned to go. But right now, in a vehicle that wasn't steering yet, was still moving, Marcus noticed something else. The truck didn't need him to guide it through the wash. The conveyor knew its job. The water knew its path, and he only needed to sit. A stronger wave of water swept across the windshield, turning the outside into shifting light and shadow. Marcus didn't try to see through it. He let his eyes rest. A small sensation appeared, not full relief, just a little less strain. Like the moment you stop fighting the current and realize you're not sinking right away. He thought about the past few months, all the effort to keep things organized, the pressure of keeping everyone else steady. The nights he came home with his shoulders still tight. Maybe life hadn't been too harsh. Maybe he'd just been swimming upstream for too long. The water began to soften. The final droplets fell more slowly. The conveyor kept moving the truck forward, steady and patient. Marcus realized his breathing had deepened without him noticing. Not the kind of deep breath you forced to relax, just a breath that wasn't being held anymore. The truck was almost out of the wash. The lights ahead became clearer. Marcus placed his hands back on the steering wheel, feeling the familiar surface. This time he didn't grip it. He just rested his hands there, ready to guide when needed. Maybe letting go isn't about allowing the water to pull you under. Maybe it's about knowing when to swim and when to let the water hold you up. And tonight, in this brief moment, Marcus was being held. The truck rolled out of the car wash and paused briefly before the conveyor released Marcus back onto the road. He stayed seated for a few seconds, not because there was something to do, but because his body wasn't ready to rush. The windshield was still dotted with water, turning the streetlights into soft, blurred halos. The world outside wasn't sharp, and this time he didn't try to make it clearer. Marcus turned on the wipers, a slow rhythm. Each pass cleared part of the glass, then the view softened again as new droplets settled. There was no moment of perfect clarity, but there was no moment of total blindness either. He noticed he didn't need to choose between the two. He pulled onto the road, driving more slowly than usual. Not because he was tired, but because there was no reason to push himself forward. The traffic light ahead shifted from green to yellow, then red. Marcus stopped, planted both feet firmly on the floor. His hands stayed on the wheel, but the pressure was different. There was no urge to grip. Something became clearer to him, swimming against the current. Doesn't just exhaust the body, it blurs your sense of direction. When all your energy goes into resistance, you stop hearing the signals of the water. You only hear your heartbeat and your rushed breathing. And in that state, it's hard to tell where the shore is. Marcus watched the thin line of cars ahead. The city at night wasn't as loud as it was during the day. It moved more slowly with its own rhythm. He noticed small details he usually overlooked. Light spilling onto tree branches, a closed storefront, a sign gently swaying in the breeze. Things that were there every night, but only appeared when he stopped rushing. Fear hadn't disappeared. It didn't need to. It just wasn't driving anymore. It sat somewhere else in the truck, quieter, no longer giving commands. Marcus realized he could live alongside this uncertainty, as long as he didn't try to shove it away or pull it too close. He remembered that moment in the river years ago when he stopped fighting the current and let the water lift him. It hadn't felt completely safe. But it was the first moment he wasn't exhausted. And only when he wasn't exhausted could he see where to go. The truck turned into his familiar neighborhood. The roads narrowed. The streetlights softened to yellow. Marcus slowed down, as if naturally matching the pace of the space around him. He parked in front of his house, turned off the engine, and stayed seated. An old habit would have told him to get out right away and finish whatever was next. But tonight, there was no list waiting. He rested his head against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment. Not long. Just long enough to feel his body being held by the seat, by the ground beneath, by the simple fact that right now, he was safe. Inhale. Exhale. No counting, no goal. Marcus opened his eyes and stepped out of the truck. The night air was cool. He closed the door gently. Every movement was a little slower, not on purpose, but because he was no longer being pulled by hurried thoughts. Maybe tomorrow the current would be strong again. Work responsibility and the things he couldn't control would return. But tonight he remembered something important: you don't always have to swim. Sometimes the wisest choice is to float and trust the water to carry you through. Marcus went inside. Fewer lights on, the space quiet. He didn't carry the feeling of bracing himself anymore. Only a soft looseness in his shoulders and back, a sign that he'd stopped pushing. The night didn't ask him to fight the current. It simply invited him to rest and let the flow do the rest. Some thoughts don't appear out of nowhere. They show up because they've traveled the same road too many times. Like tires rolling again and again over damp ground, carving a deep track. The next time the wheels don't have to decide, they slip right back into the old groove. Thoughts work the same way. Not because we try to think them, but because we're used to them. Kevin is 37 years old. He's an accountant. This time of year is the busiest. That night he's still at the office even though the clock has passed 9. The fluorescent lights hum softly. The air conditioning blows steadily. On his desk sits a stack of papers, a few yellow sticky notes overlapping each other, like reminders that refuse to leave. Kevin stares at the computer screen. The numbers are stable. No major errors. Nothing about to fall apart. And yet his mind won't stop. Am I sure I checked everything? What if there's a small mistake? Someone else would probably finish this faster. The questions arrive in the same familiar order, like a car turning onto an old road without needing directions. He peels one sticky note off the screen, then sticks it right back where it was. A small, almost meaningless action. And yet it mirrors exactly what's happening in his head, going around the same loop, hoping this time it will feel different. Kevin stands up and pushes his chair under the desk. The chair legs scrape lightly against the floor. He walks into the hallway where the lighting is dimmer. The corridor is long and quiet, filled only with the sound of his own footsteps. Each step echoes more clearly because no one else is there. Sometimes staying in one place makes thoughts speed up. Like a wheel stuck in a rut, the more it spins, the deeper it sinks. Kevin stops at the window at the end of the hall. Outside is the parking lot's streetlights casting long streaks of light across the asphalt. Nothing remarkable, but it's different enough from the screen to pull him out of the loop for a few seconds. He notices something he's felt for a long time, but rarely named. His thoughts aren't creative. They're loyal to familiar paths. And every time he believes he has to travel those paths to be certain, the tire tracks grow deeper. Kevin returns to his desk. He doesn't try to think differently. He doesn't tell himself to be more positive. He simply removes all the sticky notes from the screen, stacks them neatly, and chooses just one to place back on the corner of the desk. One next task. Not the entire road. The action doesn't make everything light instantly, but it creates a small pocket of space, like a wheel shifting just slightly out of its old groove. Even that small change feels different. The familiar scraping sound fades. The pull isn't as strong. Kevin sits down again. He works on the one task in front of him. He doesn't look ahead. He doesn't think about tomorrow. When a familiar thought returns, what if something's still missing? He notices it. Just notices. He doesn't argue with it. He doesn't follow it. And strangely, without being fed, the thought doesn't carry him as far as it usually does. Some grooves in the mind don't need to be destroyed. They just need to be seen. When we notice we're slipping into an old track, we gain another option. We don't always have to turn sharply. Sometimes all it takes is easing the wheel a little. Kevin saves the file. He stands up and turns off the monitor. The room feels less harsh without the glow. The space hasn't changed, but something in him has. Not because everything is perfect, but because he's no longer circling the same rut. If you're listening to this and recognize how easily you get caught in familiar thoughts, that's okay. The brain prefers known paths. They use less energy. But tonight, maybe you don't need to go far. Maybe it's enough to notice the old tire tracks and allow yourself to slow down just a little. Kevin leaves the office when the parking lot is much emptier. Many of the fluorescent lights in the building have been turned off. The long hallways feel quieter now, as if the space itself is slowing down after a long day. When he steps outside, cooler air touches his face, carrying the smell of wet pavement and trees after the afternoon rain. He opens his car door and sits in the driver's seat, but doesn't start the engine right away. Streetlights blur softly across the windshield. Kevin rests both hands on the steering wheel, not gripping it, not letting go. Just resting there, feeling the familiar surface under his palms. A thought appears, one he knows well. Did I do enough? It isn't loud. It isn't urgent. It's just a question that's been riding with him for years. This time he doesn't answer it. Not because he has a better answer, just because right now it isn't necessary. He starts the car and pulls out. The road home is as familiar as the thoughts in his head. Turns he could take without a map. But tonight, when the road opens into 2 lanes, Kevin turns on his signal and moves into the other one. Not because of traffic, not because he needs to go faster, just because he can. The change is small. The wheel turns only slightly, but the feeling is different. He's no longer driving straight into the old tire tracks. There's no jolt, no disruption. Just another lane running alongside the first, quieter, a little less worn. Kevin realizes that thoughts can work the same way. We don't always need to force ourselves to think positively. We don't have to argue with familiar thoughts. Sometimes it's enough to stop following them for one more lap. Let them keep moving in their old lane while we travel a bit more slowly beside them. A red light. The car stops. Kevin exhales. The breath isn't much deeper than usual, just longer. In that moment, there are no numbers to balance. No spreadsheets opening in his mind. Just the distant hum of other engines and the familiar pause of an intersection. When the light turns green, he continues driving. The road grows darker, quieter. Fewer cars now. The old tire marks on the asphalt are still there. He can see them. But he doesn't have to drive directly into them. The car moves smoothly without being pulled off course. When he gets home, Kevin parks and turns off the engine. The house is dark and still. He goes inside without turning on the main lights, just enough glow to move through the living room. He sets his keys on the table takes off his shoes, lines them up neatly by the door. Small, familiar actions, but tonight they don't feel rushed. He sits down on the sofa and leans back. The couch supports him without effort. He doesn't have to hold himself up. A few thoughts still drift through his mind, but they're no longer racing in a line, no wheels spinning too fast. If you're listening to this and noticing how often your mind travels the same old roads, that's okay. Those grooves aren't enemies. They're simply signs that you've been carrying a lot for a long time. But tonight you don't have to keep moving. You don't need to tear up the road. You don't need to find a new one. You only need to allow yourself to slow down. And if it feels right, turn the wheel just a little to the side. If you fall asleep at some point, that's completely natural. If you're still awake, you're still in a safe rhythm. The old road will be there tomorrow. But tonight, you don't need to take another lap. Some wounds no longer hurt in a sharp way, but they still leave a mark. Not to keep us angry, but to remind us that something once collided there. And sometimes what exhausts us isn't the nail that's been pulled out, but the way we keep standing there staring at the hole it left behind. Derek was 52, a mechanic used to metal parts and movements that required just the right amount of force. That afternoon, he stood behind his house, where an old wooden fence separated his small yard from the alley behind it. Late sunlight slanted through the fence boards, forming long, narrow streaks of light. The space was quiet, filled only with a light breeze and the smell of freshly cut grass. In Derek's hands were a hammer and a pair of pliers. He wasn't fixing a car today, just tightening a few loose boards. Small, familiar work that didn't ask much thought. He bent down, clamped the pliers around an old nail, and pulled slowly. The metal made a soft sound as it came free from the wood. The nail was out, but the hole was still there. Small, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. Derek brushed his fingers lightly over the edge of it, feeling the rough grain of the wood. It didn't hurt. There was just a faint sense of emptiness. He thought about his most recent apology. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just a sentence spoken after a few days of silence. The other person had nodded, had said, "It's okay." And logically, the matter was settled. But inside him, something hadn't quite smoothed out yet. Derek wasn't someone who held on to things for long. He was used to fixing problems, repairing what was broken, replacing what was worn, tightening things until they were done. But some things once pierced don't return to their original state right away, even after the nail is removed. Not because forgiveness didn't happen, but because the material needs time. He slipped the nail into his pocket and moved on to the next one. Each nail he pulled left behind another small hole in the fence. From a distance, nothing looked different. But Derek knew they were there. Like moments in life that seem resolved, yet still leave faint traces behind. The wind picked up slightly. Derek straightened, stretching his back. His spine gave a quiet pop. He let out a longer breath than usual, not from fatigue, but from noticing something shift. Not everything needs to return to perfect to be considered okay. He bent down and took a thin sliver of wood, tapping it gently into one of the holes with the hammer. The motion was slow and careful. No forcing, no rushing. The new wood didn't match the old exactly, leaving a faint line where the colors met. Derek paused and looked at it. He didn't try to hide it. He just made it sturdier. Some apologies don't erase the mark, but they can soften the edges. They make the place less sharp, less likely to hurt when brushed against. And maybe that's enough for now. Derek set the hammer aside and sat down on the back step. The sunlight softened. The yard settled into a warm, golden tone. From this distance, the small holes in the fence weren't so noticeable anymore. They hadn't disappeared, but they no longer filled his entire view. He thought about how he used to wish everything could go back to the way it was, as if nothing had happened. But life doesn't work that way. Life gives us marks, then teaches us how to live with them, without letting them decide the whole story. Derek rested his hands on his knees. His palms were dusted with fine wood shavings. He didn't brush them off right away. He just felt them there. There was a quiet kind of ease in accepting that some gaps don't need to vanish for us to finally rest. The fence stood there, not perfect, but solid. And in the last light of the day, Derek saw that he was much the same. As the sun dropped lower, the light behind the house began to change. The pale gold faded, stretched, then dissolved into shadow. Derek stayed seated on the back step, not because he was tired, but because there was no need to stand up right away. Sometimes the body knows on its own that there's nothing urgent left to do. He looked at the fence again. From this distance, the small holes were barely visible. They were still there, but they didn't ask for attention. Derek realized that for a long time, he had been standing too close to the marks inside himself. So close that he forgot how different things look when you step back just a little. He stood up, brushed the wood dust from his hands, and carried the tools into the shed. The door closed with a solid, familiar sound. A simple end to the workday. Nothing ceremonial, just putting things back where they belonged. Inside the house, the air was quieter. Derek washed his hands at the utility sink, cool water rinsing away the smell of metal and sawdust. He let the water run a few seconds longer than necessary, not because it had to, but because it felt good. When he turned it off, his hands felt cleaner, lighter, as if a thin layer of tension had been rinsed away too. He went into the living room and turned on a small lamp. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't play the radio. Those sounds could wait. Tonight, the quiet felt complete on its own. Derek sat down, leaned back, and let the chair fully support his weight. The memory of the apology no longer felt sharp in his mind. Not because it had been erased, but because he wasn't staring straight at it anymore. Some words have already been spoken. Some marks simply need time to soften. Both can be true without canceling each other out. Derek thought about how he used to rush to fill every gap right away, as if not doing so meant everything might fall apart. But the fence was still standing, even with its imperfections. And so was he. Some places that had once been hurt were now just faint traces, no longer sharp the way they had been at first. He stood up and walked toward the bedroom. His steps were slow and steady. Nothing was pulling him to hurry. When he lay down, he didn't search for the perfect position. He just rested the way his body wanted to. The blanket settled over his shoulders. The temperature was just right. small details that became clearer once his mind stopped working so hard. Derek's breath moved in, then out naturally. No counting, no adjusting. Each breath felt like a quiet reminder from his body that things were okay enough. He didn't need to be completely healed in order to rest. Some nights what we need isn't to erase every mark from yesterday. We just need to know they no longer hurt when we touch them. They can remain as part of the surface without still being sharp nails. If tomorrow, when the light returns, Derek notices the small holes in the fence again, he doesn't need to fix them right away. They aren't threatening anything. They simply remind him that there was once an impact and that there was also an effort to soften it. The room slowly settled into silence. No conclusion, no promises. Just a man who had stopped standing so close to old nail marks and a body allowed to rest within its own imperfect wholeness. And in that very gentle acceptance, sleep arrived without needing a name. Like letting the wood be what it is instead of asking it to become what it once was before the nail. The garage smelled like oil and old metal, the kind of smell that never really leaves, no matter how many times you clean. Derek liked that about it. It felt honest. Nothing pretending to be new. He stood near the workbench with his sleeves rolled up, hands dark with grease. The overhead light casting a dull yellow circle onto the concrete floor. The shop was closed for the night. No engines running, no radios playing, just the quiet hum of the light and the faint ticking sound of cooling metal. Derek was 52, a mechanic most of his life. The kind who could listen to an engine for 10 seconds and know where the problem lived. People trusted him with their cars, with their safety. They didn't know how often he questioned himself when the garage door rolled down at the end of the day. He picked up a rag and wiped his hands slowly, not trying to get them perfectly clean. Some stains stayed no matter what you did. He'd learned not to fight that. Earlier that afternoon, a customer had made an offhand comment. Nothing cruel, just careless. Something about getting older, about how long guys like you keep doing this kind of work. Derek had laughed it off. He always did. But the words had followed him into the evening, settling somewhere behind his ribs. He leaned his hip against the bench and let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The garage felt different at night, less demanding, more forgiving. During the day, everything was about fixing, adjusting, restoring things to how they were supposed to be. At night, nothing asked to be repaired. Derek's eyes drifted to a block of stone sitting in the corner, half covered with a tarp. It had been there for months, a leftover from a project he never finished. He hadn't planned on keeping it. It just stayed. He walked over and pulled the tarp back. The stone was rough, uneven edges chipped. To anyone else, it probably looked like a mistake. A failed start. Something abandoned halfway through. Derek ran his hand over the surface. Cool, solid, unapologetic. Years ago, when his kids were still young, he'd taken them to a museum on a rare day off. He remembered standing in front of a sculpture, massive and calm, carved from a single block of stone. One of his kids had asked how the artist knew what it would look like before starting. The guide had smiled and said the sculpture was already there. The artist just removed what didn't belong. That line had stayed with Derek longer than he expected. At the time, he'd thought it sounded poetic. Now, standing alone in his garage, it felt uncomfortably personal. Derek thought about his own life, the things that had chipped away at him over the years, long hours, missed moments, mistakes he replayed more often than he admitted, words he wished he'd said differently, paths he hadn't taken because responsibility had come first. Sometimes it felt like life had taken a hammer to him without asking, like he'd been worn down instead of shaped. He rested his forehead briefly against the cool stone and closed his eyes. Not in defeat, just in acknowledgement. What if the years hadn't been punishing him? What if they had been revealing him? The thought didn't land easily. It pushed against something tight in his chest. Derek wasn't used to being gentle with himself. He respected effort, endurance, getting through. But gentleness had always felt like something you earned later, if at all. He stepped back and looked at the stone again, this time with different eyes. It wasn't unfinished. It was becoming. The marks on its surface told a story of pressure resistance time. None of that made it worthless. None of it meant it had failed. Derek wiped his hands again and hung the rag on a hook by the door. He turned off the overhead light, leaving only a small lamp on near the bench. The garage slipped into shadow edges, softening expectations, fading with the brightness. He sat down on an old stool and let his shoulders drop forward. The day drained out of him slowly, like oil settling after an engine shuts down. His breathing deepened without instruction. So much of his regret came from believing he should look different by now, more polished, more certain, less marked by wear. But stone doesn't apologize for its marks. It carries them as proof of process. Derek stayed there, surrounded by quiet, letting that idea exist without trying to turn it into wisdom. Just a possibility. A softer way to see the same life. The stone waited patiently in the corner, unchanged, unbothered by the hour. And for the first time in a long while, Derek didn't feel the need to fix what he was seeing. Derek stayed on the stool longer than he expected. The small lamp cast a low amber light across the garage, turning sharp edges into softer shapes. The stone in the corner no longer looked heavy. It simply looked present, as if it had always belonged there. He noticed how different the space felt when nothing needed to be repaired. During the day, every sound in the garage meant something was wrong. At night, the quiet meant things were allowed to rest exactly as they were. Derek leaned back slightly and let his hands rest on his thighs. The grease under his nails no longer bothered him. It felt like evidence, not dirt. Proof of a life spent working, showing up, doing what needed to be done, even when it wasn't glamorous. For years, he had carried the belief that wear meant decline. That every mark on his body, every line on his face, every regret in his memory was a sign that something had gone off course. But the stone didn't see it that way. It had been shaped by pressure, not ruined by it. The thought settled in him slowly, without resistance. He didn't need to rewrite his past. He didn't need to forgive himself all at once. He only needed to stop treating his own history like a failure. Derek stood up and walked back to the stone, placing both hands on its surface again. He didn't imagine a finished form inside it. He didn't plan a next step. He simply felt the cool weight beneath his palms and let that be enough. Life, he realized, wasn't a process of becoming someone else. It was a process of uncovering what had been there from the beginning, beneath expectations, mistakes, and years of trying to be useful. He covered the stone again with the tarp, not to hide it, but to let it wait. Some things didn't need to be rushed into completion. Some things were allowed to remain unfinished for a while longer. Derek turned off the lamp and closed the garage door behind him. The click of the lock echoed briefly, then disappeared into the night. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. The street was quiet the way it gets when most people have gone to bed. As he walked toward the house, his steps felt heavier in a good way, grounded. The ache in his back didn't vanish, but it didn't feel like an enemy either. It was simply part of the body that had carried him this far. Inside, he washed his hands at the sink, watching the water darken and then clear again. He didn't scrub hard. He let the oil lift gradually, leaving faint traces behind. Not everything had to be erased. He turned off the kitchen light and made his way to the bedroom, letting the house stay dim. The bed welcomed him without ceremony. He lay down and let his arms fall where they did, chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm. The image of the stone returned once more, not as a metaphor, but as a feeling. Solid, patient, shaped by time, not broken by it. Derek felt his thoughts slow, then thin. The regrets that usually circled at night didn't find much to hold on to. There was nothing to fix right now, nothing to prove, nothing to correct. Somewhere between one breath and the next, a quiet understanding settled in. Life hadn't been trying to destroy him. It had been working with what was there, removing what didn't belong, revealing what did. The sculptor doesn't create the stone. He listens to it. Derek listened now to his own body, to the quiet of the house, to the simple fact of being here. The day loosened its grip. The years softened around the edges. And in the dark, with no tools in his hands and no expectations pressing in, he allowed himself to rest as he was already shaped, already enough, still becoming. Morning arrived very early for May. While the city was still asleep, while the streets were quiet and empty, the small kitchen behind her bakery was already lit. Soft white light fell onto the stainless steel counter, reflecting off fine traces of flour left from the day before. The space was calm, filled only with the steady hum of the ventilation fan, like a background breath. May was 37, the owner of a small bakery, used to beginning her days in silence. She washed her hands, dried them, then opened a large bag of flour. As the flour poured into the bowl, a thin white cloud rose and settled almost immediately. She added warm water, yeast, salt. Familiar movements requiring very little thought. There are seasons in life that feel like being underground. No visible progress, no sign of light. Just the sense of being buried, covered over, as if all the effort you've made has disappeared. May was in a season like that. Not because the bakery was failing, not because of any major crisis, just because things had stayed still longer than she'd hoped. She placed her hands into the bowl and began to knead. The dough clung to her palms, soft and warm. With each fold, push, and turn, the dough changed shape very slowly. There was no immediate result, only the patient repetition of the same motion. In May's mind, familiar thoughts drifted through. What if I chose the wrong place? What if all this effort is only burying more time? What if I'm in the dark, not to grow, but to disappear? The questions weren't loud. They arrived steadily like the fan overhead. May didn't try to push them away. Her hands kept kneading. There was something she'd learned over years of baking. Dough needs time in the dark. Yeast needs quiet to do its work. If you pull the dough into the light too soon, if you force it to rise before it's ready, the bread won't have structure. Not because the yeast is weak, but because the time isn't right. She covered the bowl with a cloth and set it aside. The dough rested there silent. There was nothing to show that it was changing. But May knew that inside something very small was happening. Invisible, unheard, but real. She moved to another counter and began weighing ingredients for the next batch. The scale shifted slightly. May adjusted, adding a bit, taking a bit away. There was no perfect number on the first try. Only small corrections, then letting things settle. The darkness in the kitchen wasn't an absence. It was a foundation. It held the temperature steady. It protected fragile things from drying out from shock. May thought of seeds. When a seed is planted in the soil, it doesn't ask when it will see the sun. It doesn't compare itself to other seeds. It does the only thing it knows how to do, split open very slowly in the dark. Some days May wished for clearer signs, a confirmation, a rising number, proof that she wasn't standing still. But then she remembered past batches of bread. Some looked unchanged until the very last moment. Others rose too quickly, only to collapse once they hit the oven. She returned to the bowl and lifted the cloth to check. Nothing dramatic. The surface was still smooth, just slightly more taut. May wasn't disappointed. She covered it again, set a timer, and turned away. In the quiet kitchen, May made herself a cup of tea. Steam rose and dissolved into the cool air. She held the cup with both hands, leaned against the counter, and took a small sip. The taste was gentle, not striking, but enough to linger on her tongue for a moment. Maybe the hardest part of dark seasons is not knowing whether you're being nurtured or buried. And the only comfort is this: from the outside, both states look exactly the same. The difference is that in one of them, life is quietly at work beneath the surface. May set the cup down. The clock on the wall clicked softly, marking a few minutes passing. She didn't rush. She knew she didn't need to watch every second. The most important things don't follow a clock. The kitchen continued its work. The dough continued to rest. And in that just right darkness, something was beginning, even though no one could see it yet. The clock on the wall clicked again softly, like a reminder that time was still moving, even when no one was watching it closely. May set her tea down and returned to the bowl of dough. She lifted the cloth and looked a little longer this time. The surface had risen just slightly. Not much. Just enough to show that it wasn't as still as it had been before. She smiled barely. Not because of a big success, just because of the small confirmation that the process was working. May didn't poke the dough, didn't test it, didn't do anything more. She covered it again like placing soil back over a seed that had just begun to sprout, letting it continue its work. Some changes only need to be acknowledged, not interfered with. Touching too early often comes from impatience, not care. May had learned that through many failed batches, through many moments of rushing to see results. She turned to preheat the oven. The sound of it starting up was gentle, unhurried. The air in the kitchen slowly warmed. The overhead light fell on familiar surfaces, nothing new, but nothing missing either. These things had supported her for years. May wiped her hands on her apron and leaned back against the counter, letting her body rest for a rare few minutes with nothing that needed doing. In that pause, the thoughts came back. Not as sharp as before, just softer questions. How long until I see results? How long until things feel brighter? She didn't answer them. She let them pass. Darkness, when it isn't resisted, starts to feel like soil. Soil doesn't promise anything. It simply holds. It holds moisture. It holds warmth. It keeps fragile things from drying out. And then when no one is paying attention, it allows life to push upward. May stood and began arranging the baking trays. Slow, steady movements. Nothing urgent. She placed each piece of dough with enough space between them, allowing room to rise without touching. A quiet kind of respect for each loaf's own process. When the final tray slid into the oven, May closed the door and turned the temperature dial. A small click sounded, then silence. Inside the oven, the darkness was deeper, hotter, the place where the dough would transform completely. No one could see it happening, but it was happening all the same. She turned off a few more lights, leaving the kitchen in a softer glow. May sat down on the wooden chair in the corner and closed her eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to stop needing to look. Her body relaxed as warmth spread through the room. Maybe not every dark season needs to be understood. Maybe some seasons only need to be trusted. Trusted that if you've planted the seed with enough care and patience, the rest is no longer in your hands. May opened her eyes and looked toward the oven. The light inside glowed faintly through the glass. She didn't stand to check, didn't lean in close. She knew this part didn't need constant watching. Everything had already been placed where it needed to be. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Distant traffic, another morning arriving. But inside this small kitchen, the rhythm stayed slow, warm, steady. May stood and tidied quietly. She didn't rush to open the oven, didn't rush to see the outcome. She allowed this moment to pass fully. Maybe darkness isn't a sign of failure. Maybe it's simply the necessary pause before something becomes strong enough to meet the light. The kitchen kept breathing. The oven kept working. And May, in that quiet, allowed herself to trust what was growing, even without yet knowing its shape. There are days when you wake up feeling like everything is heavier than usual. Not because anything bad has happened. The sky looks the same. Work is still there. People around you are still talking and laughing. But inside, everything feels coated in a dull gray layer. Wherever you look, you notice what's missing, what's wrong, what's tiring. And it becomes easy to believe that this is just how life is. Lily is 47 years old. She works in human resources at a mid-sized company. Her job is to listen to other people's problems, help untangle conflicts, and bring order to complicated situations at work. She's been doing it for years, long enough to get used to staying calm, staying neutral, keeping a steady appearance on the outside. That evening, Lily gets home later than usual. The apartment is quiet. No TV playing, no calls waiting to be returned. She hangs her bag on the hook and walks straight into the bathroom. She doesn't turn on the bright overhead light, just the small lamp by the mirror, enough to see her reflection. She stands there for a moment. The face looking back at her is familiar, but tonight it looks more tired. Not exhausted, just worn in a quiet, accumulated way. The kind of tired that comes from holding everything together all day. Lily reaches up and touches the frame of her glasses. Thin plastic. Familiar in her hand, she takes them off and sets them on the sink. Without her glasses, everything softens slightly. The edges blur. Not sharp, but not uncomfortable either. She turns on the tap. Warm water flows steadily, fogging the mirror with a thin layer of steam. Lily bends down, washes her hands, then splashes a little water on her face. The warmth spreads, easing the tightness in her skin. She looks back at the mirror. The glass is hazy now. Her reflection softened, indistinct. And in that moment, Lily feels a small, unexpected smile form. All day long, she's been looking at everything through a similar haze. Not because things had gotten worse, but because she was tired. And when you're tired, everything naturally looks grayer. She reaches for a towel and wipes the mirror. One gentle swipe, then another. The surface clears. The light reflects more cleanly. Not brighter, just truer to what it is. Lily picks up her glasses. The lenses are marked with small smudges, fingerprints, fine dust collected over the course of a long day. She runs them under the water, then dries them carefully with a tissue. When she puts them back on, the room comes into focus again. Not more beautiful, not worse, just clearer. And in that very ordinary moment, Lily realizes something simple all day. She hasn't been seeing life directly. She's been seeing it through her own exhaustion. Sometimes we think we're seeing the truth. Everything is hard. Everyone is difficult. No matter what I do, it's never enough. But sometimes those images are just being tinted by stress and fatigue. Not because we're pessimistic, but because we haven't rested yet. Lily turns off the tap. The bathroom grows quieter. A few drops fall, then stop. She leans lightly against the sink and exhales. Not deeply, not on purpose. Just letting the breath leave her body a little more easily. A familiar thought shows up. Tomorrow will probably be the same. Lily doesn't push it away. She looks at it the way she looked at the watermarks on the mirror. It's there, but it doesn't represent the whole picture. She leaves the bathroom and steps into the living room. The warm yellow light fills the space. The room looks the same as it always does. But something inside her feels slightly different. Not because the problems are gone, just because the haze is thinned. If you're listening to this and everything from today feels darker than usual, that's okay. You may not be seeing things wrong. You might just be looking through lenses that have gathered a bit of dust. And tonight, you don't need to fix your life. You only need to gently clean the way you're seeing it. After leaving the bathroom, Lily doesn't turn on any more lights. She keeps the apartment softly lit, as if she doesn't want things to be too sharp or clear right now. She walks slowly through the living room, sets her phone down on the table, and places it face down. Not to avoid anyone, just because there's no need to look at it anymore. She sits on the sofa. The backrest is soft and familiar. As she leans into it, her body seems to remember that it doesn't need to stay upright. Her shoulders release, her neck loosens, her exhale stretches a little longer than it did when she was standing. Lily looks around the room. Familiar objects, the table lamp, the bookshelf, the small plant in the corner. Nothing has changed. And yet tonight they don't feel as heavy as they did when she first came home. Not because they're more beautiful, just because she's looking at them with eyes that are less tired. There's something easy to forget after long days like this. When we're exhausted, we see everything through that exhaustion. Casual words start to sound harsh. Small tasks feel like burdens. And it becomes easy to believe that this is the truth. But sometimes the truth is simply an image viewed through dusty lenses. Lily stands and walks over to the window. She pulls the curtain aside. Outside, the city lights are on, not loud, not dazzling, just scattered squares of light in the dark. She stands there for a moment, not thinking about the people in those rooms, just watching light and shadow exist together like an inhale and an exhale. She realizes she doesn't need to understand anything else tonight. She doesn't need to analyze whether she handled the day well or not. She doesn't need to replay conversations in her head. She only needs to let what she sees come in, and then go without holding on to it. When Lily turns toward the bedroom, she doesn't carry any clear thoughts with her. Just a feeling that's slightly lighter than before. She sits on the edge of the bed and removes her glasses again, placing them on the table. Not because she can't see, but because she doesn't need to see anymore right now. Without the glasses, the room softens. Edges blur. The light diffuses, and in that blur, Lily feels at ease. Not everything needs to be clear all the time, especially before sleep. She lies down, the blanket settles over her. Her body finds a familiar position on its own. No special routine, no reminder to relax. Just someone who has reached the end of the day and is allowed to rest. A thought drifts through tomorrow will probably still have a lot to do. Lily doesn't follow it. She doesn't argue with it. She lets it pass like the distant headlights of a car moving down the street. If you're listening to this and recognize how often you see life through a layer of tiredness, that's okay. You don't need to force yourself to see everything more positively. With enough rest, that tint will fade on its own. Tonight doesn't ask you to understand everything. It doesn't ask you to be clear-headed. It only asks you to stop looking at life through eyes that are worn out. If you fall asleep at some point while listening to this, that's completely natural. If you're still awake, you're still resting in a safe, quiet space. Everything can be looked at again in the morning. For now, you're allowed to let things stay a little blurry. Listen a little longer, or let sleep arrive whenever it wants to. The stories are done. The lessons are learned. There is nothing left to do. If you found peace in this sanctuary tonight, you can return here whenever you wish. We will keep the fire lit for you. If you wish to support this channel, you may leave a gentle like or subscribe so we can find each other again in the vast ocean of the internet. But now, as we move into the final space of rest, let's plant seeds of peace deep into your subconscious. Let go, drift, and let these truths become your own. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. I am rooted to this moment like an ancient mountain. My body feels heavy and solid, like warm stone. My body feels heavy and solid, like warm stone. My body feels heavy and solid, like warm stone. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. The winds of thought blow around me, but I remain unmoved. I possess the silent strength of the earth. I possess the silent strength of the earth. I possess the silent strength of the earth. My stillness is ancient and deep. Stillness is ancient and deep. My stillness is ancient and deep. Stable and completely safe. Grounded, stable, and completely safe. I am grounded, stable, and completely safe. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. Like a mountain in winter, I am wrapping myself in a blanket of silence. I rest in the foundation of my own being. Rest in the foundation of my own being. Rest in the foundation of my own being. Breathing is slow and steady, like the seasons. My breathing is slow and steady like the seasons. My breathing is slow and steady like the seasons. Timeless as the rocks. As timeless as the rocks. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. The earth supports me. I can let go of holding myself up. Sanctuary of stillness. Sanctuary of stillness. Sanctuary of stillness. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. External noise cannot shake my inner ground. Relaxation sinking into the earth. Relaxation sinking into the earth. Relaxation sinking into the earth.